Buddy. Hopefully, this is working and all the technology is right this time. I'm Michelle O'Neill, and I have to remember to look at the camera, so I'm really bad about that. I'm Michelle O'Neill. Welcome to the Michelle O'Neill Show. So, today we're doing a special edition of the Michelle O'Neill Show. We're doing a live interview. Most of you know that February is Black History Month, and I thought it would be very interesting to do a live interview and have a conversation about Black History Month. I think that we need to have more discussions about Black History Month. And I happen to be American Indian. I'd love to have a discussion about American Indian history also. But today we're going to have a talk about Black History Month. And I'm joined by Judge Audrey Moorehead, who is a very, very good friend of mine. And she is a Dallas County criminal court judge. I'm also joined by Candace Wicks. She is a former educator in Dallas. She is on the board of directors of the MLK Center in Dallas. And she is also a founding member of, now let me get this, I got to get this right. I wrote it down. The research. Oh, nope. See, I got it wrong. Remembering Black Dallas. So she's a charter member of Remembering Black Dallas. And I am told that she is our expert today on Black History Month. And that
That's what Audrey says.
that's what Audrey said. Well, if Audrey says it, it's right, isn't it?
We'll see.
I mean, that's always been my experience. I mean, if Audrey tells me to do something, I do it. So, anyway, so welcome, Audrey and Candace. I'm so glad for you to join me. This is only the second month of my podcast. For those of you who aren't familiar, I started a podcast in January this year where I'm telling transformational stories, basically authentic stories of real people going through real bad stuff, going through their biggest ditches in life, and then how they climb out of those ditches and still achieve success. So in January, we told the story of Michael Ray Newman. And then in February, we're going to talk to my friend Rita Oliver, who is a financial advisor in Dallas, and her story airs on Tuesday, February 6th. So hopefully y'all all join us on YouTube for that. But today, welcome Judge Audrey and Candace to the show. I'm so excited about this topic. So, all right, so let's start out. So tell me, just start at the very beginning. That's always a great place to start. I'm not going to sing, but I love that saying from the movie. So starting at the beginning, what is, for anybody living under a rock out there, what is Black History Month about?
Candace, you're the expert.
Well, I'll say that there's a miseducation about Black history. Black history is American history. The focus just happens to be on people whose skin has been kissed by the sun and are from the original continent of Africa, which is the motherland of all creation. So I would say, don't just say Black History Month is about Black Americans and their contributions. It's about American history.
And I would definitely agree with that. I posted, I think, on my Facebook page that Black History Month in this country started around 1915, and it was by Carter G. Woodson. And his goal, as I understood it or have read it to be, was that it was to celebrate the achievements of African Americans or Black people. Let me say that, because we weren't African Americans then. We were a lot of things, but we weren't African Americans. We've been Negroes, we've been colored. It just depends on what day. But so that's another historical perspective of how we recognize race and ethnicity of people who are from all over the country. But it was to celebrate the achievements of Black people and to raise awareness of how Black people exist in this country. And it started out like a week. It was Negro History Week. and over time it's grown into a month. And I believe that this conversation that we're having is kind of what Black History Month is supposed to evolve was supposed to have evolved into, was a opportunity that we can take a specific time that we could say, you know what, I have an opportunity in February to go and learn more about my own history, about other
Mhm.
people's history, to be a place to start conversations, a safe space and place to have conversations that may be uncomfortable in other times, but it gives you a good place to start. Hey, Audrey, it's Black History Month. I was meaning to talk to you about that. What do y'all do during Black History Month? Whatever it is, but just to create an opportunity for people to connect where they might not have an opportunity to do so.
Right. And that's really why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think whether it's politics, religion, being women, being men, being, of a particular race or religion, I mean, I just don't think that we have enough conversations. And, I mean that Audrey and I have lots of conversations, and I feel like Audrey's somebody that I can ask questions and say things to. And if I am wrong or if I'm uneducated, she'll educate me and say, Michelle, that's not how you need to look at this. And what I mean, really, whether it's politics or race or religion, she will do that. And we happen to be different political spectrums. We happen to be, I think we're similar religious perspectives, but we also happen to be different racial perspectives. And so, like, that's what I want to do today is have a conversation, and I want to educate viewers on how they can have conversations about Black History Month. So okay, you said something a second ago, like it wasn't always called Black History Month, right?
Well,
No,
we're at African American history right now, but we in our culture go in between Black History Month, African American History Month, Black History Month. We're past Negro though.
Okay. Right.
We
And
may say we still sing the Negro national anthem because that is what it is called, and that's the way it was penned as Negro. You know the writers of the Negro national anthem didn't change it to African American because they did not live in this
right.
climate, that we're in now. But we were once Negro. We still might be in some conversations, and even worse than that in some other conversations when we're not in the room. But we are African American for the most part, but I still say Black. Black History Month, African American History Month.
Well, I think that's one of those things of when you know better, you do better. And as we've all evolved, I mean, the language changes, whether it's about this topic or other topics. I mean, so now it's African American History Month. It was started, I think Audrey said, in 1915. What was the reasoning for Mr. Woodson starting this tribute to the history of Black Americans?
but I think again, it really was to give a place and space to celebrate the many, many achievements of Black Americans, of Black people in this country, because so many things from the peanut for medical inventions, for all these things that Black people accomplish.
Right.
People don't know that those things have occurred. They don't know who the first was who did this. They don't know how the White House was even built. They don't know the role that African Americans played, Black people played in even the construction of our own White House. So it gave an opportunity to talk about the history of our culture and also raise awareness of how we function in this culture, that despite all those achievements, in 1915, things just were not going gangbusters, right?
Right.
So it gave us a platform to discuss and raise awareness about the disparities in the community.
So you mentioned the White House. Tell the viewers what contribution Black Americans played in the building of the White House.
Candace, you are the resident real historian.
African
Here.
Americans built the White House. That's very simple. Black slaves built the White House and were responsible for its construction.
So, okay, so what does Black History Month mean to each of you personally? Like how do y'all personally feel that it, contributes to you individually and to the culture maybe locally of Dallas?
Oh, I'll take that one. I'll do that one first.
That was a softball to you, Kansas.
Yes, it was, because this gives me an opportunity to shed a little light.
Excellent.
The I hope you can see this. The picture that I'm holding is on my mother's side of the family. This is Jeff and Hannah Hill, and they were freed. They owned land here in Dallas, Texas in 1888. A piece of land between 30 to 35 acres of land out by White Rock Lake, known as Little Egypt. And they founded, in our family, we founded a church. Sarah and Commodore Hill being Jeff's son, he and his wife, my grandmother's sister, founded a church called Little Egypt Baptist Church, which is still here in Dallas today. Unfortunately, their section of land in the Lake Highlands part of the city of Dallas was sold to some developers in 1962, and they were, I'm going to say, forced. Some people in the city may want to change the wording on that, but they were really forced to leave because they had dilapidated shacks, outhouses, no running water, outhouses, and their shacks were falling in, and they had asked the city of Dallas to give them running water, but they were denied. And so the option wasn't an option. It was suggested that they take the $30,000 per family and find another place to go. So that community was spread just far and wide, from Richardson, Texas, Garland, Texas. Some of us are here in Oak Cliff. Others are in Duncanville and Mansfield. We're spread out now. So those families that were all together, um, you know, right around the emancipation, right around Juneteenth, they've all been dispersed. And so that is part of my family's history. We are one of the first families in the city to own land. And unfortunately, we don't have that land anymore. But you do know that it's worth millions now.
Right.
Property is worth millions. And so another shameless plug, but I don't I don't mind. This is a great opportunity. This is one of the older books that the organization Remembering Black Dallas had, and it's called African American Families and Settlements of Dallas on the Inside Looking Out. And it is now in another book called Our Stories. And it's on Barnes and Nobles and Half Price Books, but it's called Our Stories by Dr. George Keaton Jr. And he was the president of the Remembering Black Dallas, CEO, now deceased. He died this past year. And he took the old books that we had in the original group called Black Dallas Remembered. He consolidated all of that history into one book. So I would suggest that people take a look at that to get further information.
That's interesting. Whenever we get off of this conversation, I'd love for you to send me the link to that book so we can promote that book as well.
Okay, it'll be Our Stories. Yes, that
Yeah.
would be beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, okay, so you said the church still exists. Tell me where the church is.
It's in Oak Cliff. And
Okay.
if you give
So
me
they
a
had
second.
to move the church too.
Oh yes. Once the property was sold, they had to find land here in the city of Dallas, and so they moved to Oak Cliff. And then since the original move, they had a little bitty house, and then they gathered money and moved. So they've had three different moves since they've left Little Egypt, but they're here in the Oak Cliff area, and I'll give you
Okay.
the address in just a little bit.
Okay. And is it still called Little Egypt Church
It
or is it
is. It's
all
called Little
right?
Egypt Baptist
Okay.
Church.
And is your family still involved in the
My
church?
family is not still involved in it. We're primarily at Sims Chapel in Garland, Texas, where my grandfather was a deacon, and some of us are at Hamilton Park Baptist Church, and then my church is New Hope Baptist Church, and we're the oldest Black Baptist church in the city, founded by Blacks, founded by slaves. So there's some other churches older, but we're the oldest one in the city proper of Dallas. But so we're all spread out, and then there are other churches that some of our other relatives go to, obviously, but those are the main three that we talk about.
Well, so maybe this is a good opportunity to ask this question. There's so much about your personal historical story that has to do with the church and the different churches that your family started and has belonged to. What is the significance? What is the role? This may be an obvious question to me, but it may not be to other viewers out there. Like, how important is the church as a central figure in the Black community?
Look, I can only speak for mine because some things are changing, but in my family, the role of the church was always at the center and up front. We all went to church. It was expected as a kid, and we've made choices to continue to be active within the church. The Black church has always been at the center of our existence. Faith has always given us a hope for the future, even in the midst of segregation, even in the midst of Jim Crow, even in the midst of being lynched, even in the midst of family members disappearing at the hands of the KKK and others. I mean, it's just a part of us, and it's a essential part of Black people and the experience. I mean, if you listen to R&B, if you listen to jazz, if you listen to contemporary gospel, it has its tie back to even the Negro spiritual. A
Right.
lot of the symbolism and the metaphors used within the singing of, keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Always be ready, always be prepared. Follow the drinking gourd, where we talk about um, transferring our places of existence because we know that the slave master is looking for us, trying to come from the south and going through the Underground Railroad to the north to find
Right.
freedom. So we sing, a lot of different songs that are tied back to our faith, which are tied back to the spiritual, which tell the story of our faith. So yeah, it's all intertwined.
Right. Right. So, Judge Audrey, what do you think is the role of Black History Month in promoting cultural diversity and promoting understanding of each other in our society today? Is there an evolving of the importance of Black History Month?
Oh, absolutely. I certainly have to say that being to learn about anybody's culture, there's value. We all have to coexist in this community together. Um, we have a Statue of Liberty that says that is inviting people from all over to come here and for us to be in this big quote unquote melting pot together with the expectation that this country can grow and achieve together. But we can't do that if we don't know each other and understand each other. We're doing more in workplace environments. You are an expert, if you will, on motivation in terms of all types of motivation, personal motivation, professional motivation, coaching in the workplace. Some of those things that have to touch on the fact that you have to have some type of interpersonal skills. Soft as they may be, they translate to the bottom line. And so that's why it's important to have these types of moments of celebration. I will just go ahead and say that February is the shortest month of the year, but thank you anyway, the universe, for giving us the shortest month of the year. I'm gonna make the most of my 28 days.
At 29 this
I'm
year,
I'm
29
gonna take
days.
it to it. Someday it's 29, and my brother was born at the end of the month. And some years he gets older, and some years he does not. Um, but I think it's imperative that we take every effort, not just during Black History Month, to learn about different cultures, not just the Black history, but if we fail to acknowledge the history of our country, especially as it relates to the African American experience, it leads to ignorance, it leads to misunderstanding, it leads to continued injustice, continued inequality, and most definitely a lack of empathy and unity. And we need empathy and unity to move forward. We
Mhm,
can't, a divided house cannot stand. And right now, this country is divided. And
mhm.
so that fracture is causing a problem in our democracy. It's in all of the important aspects in our community. You see issues. You see issues in education. That impacts everybody, not just Black
Right,
people. It's everybody.
right,
You see
right.
issues in healthcare. Those healthcare disparities. COVID-19. One of the things that COVID-19 did was it exposed the disparities in healthcare for
100%.
for Black and brown people and women. We talked about a book. The book The Accommodation is another book if you're interested in history and Black Dallas history, and not just Black Dallas history, just the history of Dallas and how. Yes, it's one of my favorite books by Jim Schutz. It's a shocking tale of how Dallas looks the way it is and why Dallas is so different. I say that all the time, that Dallas is different. um all the world hates the United States, and everybody in the United States hates Texas, and everybody in Texas pretty much hates Dallas. That's just the way it is. Because Dallas is a great financial center of this country, and it sits as somewhat of a beacon, and it's different from every other city that it has continued to grow. We have more millionaires per square mile than any other city in the country. We have all of these resources, but yet we have this chasm of care for the people who are living in who are differently abled, and who have or who have in other ways not been able to obtain what we like to call the American dream. We've seen an erosion of voting rights legislation. What is that about? Because we had the Civil Rights Act in 1965. We gave voting rights to everybody. I think most people will agree everybody should have the right to vote. If you're a citizen of this country, you have a right to participate in the process. We kind of can think that. But what happened was, and how history informs that, is that when when slaves were brought in and brought into the South to the cotton fields and the railroads and do all those things, people, they did not envision that by bringing in all of these Black people into the South, that they would one day ever have the right to vote. We weren't people. We At some point we became 3/5. Now that was one thing. We
Wesley
got to be
versus
3/5,
Ferguson.
but they never expected the vote to go to Black people. Now they say, oh, the Black people get to vote. And so when they vote for things that we don't particularly like. And what if they get more power? And then so now you have this erosion of voting rights where you want to take the voting rights from people who had the voting rights. But that's because we don't really understand our history and how we've meandered into this place and space that we are. So that's why these conversations, and Michelle, so glad you asked the question, is why Black History Month is important, because it gives us a chance to have a conversation about that. So if you know and you understand how we got here, maybe we can understand how we can move forward collectively to a more positive place and space that we can all achieve together.
How do you think that Black History Month will evolve over future generations? I mean, it's obviously important. I mean, I love history. I love studying history of all types. Um, and I think history and the study of history is important, but I don't know that young people have that same viewpoint, at least while they're young, until they get old like me. But how do you think that future generations will be impacted by having a month that celebrates the achievements of Black Americans?
Well, there's a threat right now in terms of educating the general masses on Black history. Um, there's legislation to, take Black history out of the curriculum. And I think you do the children a disservice for not providing the truth and not, as I like to say, erasing the truth.
I mean, that's a pretty controversial topic right now.
It is,
Definitely.
but it's facts.
Yeah.
I mean, what you don't want anybody to know that a Black man uh, worked on blood plasma, which we all do need from time to time. If you've ever had to go to the hospital, you don't want Black children or anybody else to know that a Black man created the traffic light, that there were other inventions where Black scientists had their patents stolen and other people are taking credit for their inventions.
And I
That's
think that
facts.
example that you gave, Candace, though, is where we get to the crux of this issue. Is I think we've had conversations offline about how we want our pets to have therapy. Our pets have anxiety. And there seems to be, because adults are struggling with conversations about implicit bias and racism, and we're hearing white fragility and all these terms that create this uncomfortability. We're having these uncomfortable conversations that I think it is not, I won't say it's natural, but it may be that the protective instincts of some parents are that if I'm having angst and anxiety about having these conversations, I'm concerned that if my 8-year-old sees pictures of slaves and slave ships, they're going to feel some type of personal responsibility, that it's going to give them some angst and anxiety about who they are as people, that we don't want our kids to feel any pain or uncomfortableness about the history of this country, that somehow if we talk about slavery, which was a thing, and that at the end of the day, yes, white people brought Black people over here against their will. It wasn't a Carnival cruise line. It just wasn't. So but
Right.
when we talk about that, there's concern that children may hear that and have emotional responses to it that cause them to react poorly. And so this is a mechanism, so
Right.
they say, to protect them from feeling that. But the sad part about it and the tragic part about it is that all the children suffer because of that, because by minimizing that experience, you hurt the ethnic person that is being erased from the history book. To not talk about the actual camps that we had for people in this country during World War II, to not talk about the Holocaust and what happened, that
Or
minimizes the
or or
experience
the Trail of Tears.
of the Trail of Tears, to talk about the indigenous populations. I one of my very, very favorite shows, and I just hate to admit it, I really do hate to admit it, but I love Kevin Costner. I love that. I really do love that show. But the land that they are arguing about should not even be argued about by Kevin Costner. I mean, it wasn't his land. How his family got that land. You can go back and watch 1863 and all those. That land was the way they received that land. So to not have that conversation and give the
Right.
fullness of the story is very, very unfair. I think. And so, as Candace articulated, we're going backwards in the way that we talk about these things. We have generations of people who've been successful in their careers with Black history in the books. And I don't want to talk about critical race theory at all. I really don't. But I do want to be clear that when we say things like critical race theory and connect that to K through 12, that's disingenuous, because critical race theory is not taught to children. It's a college course. And it's always been a college course. But they throw these words out like critical race theory, like that's going to happen in your elementary school. It never has, and it probably never will. But it's a term that scares people and makes them nervous when they hear critical race and theory, and that is, we're indoctrinating people's minds. But that is not what it is. And so that's why these conversations are important, because it gives us a chance to talk about it, and I can hear why you have concerns or why the other person has concerns about it, and they can hear why we have concerns, and we can both walk away from that conversation, at least having shared some information.
But now that she mentioned Trail of Tears, let's be very clear. I mean, my great grandmother was full blooded Cherokee.
Mine
Her
too.
husband was African American.
Mine
They
Mine
too.
happened
was
to live in
mine was a
Oklahoma.
Blackfoot. Mine was a
Right,
black. I had a full-blooded Blackfoot indigenous person as a grandmother.
right.
Full,
Grandma Susan
full.
was Cherokee. And
Yeah,
if you look at my mother and my grandmother's pictures, they have very high cheekbones, and you can just see,
you can look at me.
right?
My cheekbones, the my hair,
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
hair is straight. If you, I don't know, Michelle, when the
Not
last time you actually
today.
saw my hair. I don't know when the last time you actually
I,
saw my
I,
hair,
I do
but
know your hair
but but
texture is
but
different.
my hair is very, very fine and very, very straight. It's not, it's not coarse or any of that. So that comes from that lineage, that we've evolved.
Mhm.
We're all part of something else. As Candace said at the beginning, you know,
Right.
the first man was found in Africa. I don't know why we can't just say that. Let's just say it. It was Africa. I don't.
Right.
Why is that awkward? Because that does not take anything from anybody else,
Right.
right? This is, the world is not a plate. It's not a pie that if you give me something, that means you won't have something else.
There's
Your
plenty of
gifts will make,
success to go around.
right. Yeah, your gifts will make room for you.
And then another thing, if you want to know about African Americans, your sphere of friends, your organizations that you belong to, should be diverse in some aspect of your life.
Right.
So you will never hear another person's perspective if everybody in your circle thinks and agrees and they're all aligned in every aspect of human existence.
My grandmother called that preaching to the choir.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, if every organization I belong to is all African American and I'm never around other people who are non-African American, I don't get to hear their perspective, nor do they get to hear
Right.
me.
And that's true about politics too. I mean, I don't want this to be about politics,
No.
but I mean, it's true about anybody that's different than you, whether it's a different country, whether it's a different religion, whether it's a different race, whether it's different politics. I mean, I think we would all find that we are, to quote a very wonderful, famous poet, we are all more alike than we are unalike. So,
Absolutely.
speaking of said very famous poet who I adore and love her work, tell me who, since Black History Month is to celebrate the achievements of Black Americans throughout history, and particularly American history. So, tell me somebody that you think is underrated or not celebrated enough that has contributed to Black history.
Hmm.
You want me to go first? I'll tell you mine.
Yeah. Tell me.
Okay, go ahead.
Mine is Barbara Jordan. So, Barbara Jordan. So, I came from a very small town in Texas where I was raised. There were very few people of color of any color. Uh, and most people, when they look at me, think of me as Caucasian, which I am partly that. But so there was just very little diversity. And my father, he owned record stores in Killeen, Texas, where Fort Hood is, and his customer base was very diverse. So that was my exposure to diversity. But whenever you watch TV, whenever I was young, there wasn't a lot of diversity on TV, and certainly whatever diversity there wasn't in a positive light. To me, Barbara Jordan was the first African American woman that I ever saw that was in a positive light. I mean, she was an amazing woman. She was, for any of the viewers who don't know who Barbara Jordan was, she was an African American woman. She was a lawyer. She was a politician. She was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. She was the first African American female lawyer ever elected to the Texas Senate. Um, And and she blazed a trail, and I think of that as she blazed a trail for all women, but particularly women of color.
And Barbara Jordan, also the Honorable Barbara Jordan, was a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, which is my sorority. And my aunt was on campus. Dorothy Johnson, my daddy's sister, was on campus with Barbara Jordan at Texas Southern. They both were at, in college at the same time. And so, yeah, she was great. Always was above her peers. Um, of
Well,
course,
and think about how difficult that must have been for her, and the prejudices, the slights, the big ones and the little ones, and how hard she had to work just to make inroads in Congress. I mean, I know y'all are friends with Jasmine. I'm friends with Jasmine. Jasmine is out there in Washington D.C. doing great things, and and women like Barbara Jordan paved the way so that she could be there and could have maybe an easier route to having conversations that need to be had in DC.
Well, definitely, and Jasmine is the product not only of Barbara Jordan, but I'm gonna take you back to Shirley Chisholm.
there you go. I was
Shirley
thinking that. Go
Chisholm
ahead.
was the first one to go to Congress. We talking about
Hmm.
1969,
Right.
late 60s. That the there's been a lot of sacrifice, and we had this weekend we had a chance to celebrate with Reverend Dr. Frederick Haynes as he took over for Jesse Jackson for the Rainbow Push
Hmm.
Coalition. But Jesse Jackson, ran for president, and when he ran for president, it was what, 1984.
It was
um
1984
so
and 88.
and if he, had he not run in 84, as they say, there's no Obama
Hmm.
in 2004. We don't have, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. There are lots of legal giants, but they're giants in all types of areas. We have your Althea Gibson, who played tennis. We love Simone Biles, and we love Serena Williams, and we love those, but there are people who really paved the way and broke the ceiling, to allow for people to achieve things. I think of Dorothy Height, who started the National Council of Negro Women, um, and how that has helped to advance the cause of women. And we're getting ready. And I know, Michelle, you're going to have me back for Women's History Month, because that's March. I just can't let my month go. When I was in law school, the whole month of law school, the whole month of February, I made them stand when I went into my constitutional law class. When I walk in the door, it's February. Everybody got to stand up. I tried to take it to February, to March, but Dean Fontaine was having none of it. I had exhausted her patience with Black History Month. She drew the line. But when we talk about disparities, that's why we have to have a women. That's why we have to have March for women, because we got to have a moment that we can get some attention on the issues that impact our communities. And so
Right.
identifying those people who have been overlooked and marginalized in our history is another way to do it, which was one of the purposes that Carter G. Woodson had for creating Black History Month.
So
And
you mentioned Shirley Chisholm. Didn't she run for president before Jesse Jackson did?
in
Mhm,
1972,
Yep.
as a
mhm.
representative from New York, yes.
And and she was the first Black candidate of either gender to run for president.
Correct.
Yeah. 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 So Candace, tell me who would be a person in history that you would think should have more attention.
Okay, well, I spoke about this to Audrey. I think I'm talking about everybody in the United States. I think there are hidden pieces of freedmen's towns and families that were African American that owned major pieces of land in cities and towns all across the country. And so I would say freedmen's generations, freedmen's families. That's one collective group of people that are really heroes that don't get, people to share too much about them. Also, something that just happened, which I think you alluded to it, but I'm going to say this before I forget. Delta Sigma Theta was the only African American group of women that participated within the Women's Suffrage March in 1913, and that was our first sorority's public act of public service, which was supporting um, Anglo women, knowing full well that they would not get the right to vote, but they were still in support. And the underhanded piece of it is, factually, some of the women did not even want them in the parade because
Mm.
they were of color. However, they were allowed, and they were the very last entry in the parade, but they did do that. And that shows that even if we don't receive the benefits and the blessings of our protest, eventually we may, and eventually we did. So that's just something that happened in 1913. But another person that I wanted to say doesn't get a lot of public um,
Recognition.
public notoriety. Um, I'm gonna say it just in general, our black journalists, um, people that have put pen to paper in order to save and preserve our history, the black journalists, the Ida B. Wells of the world. Uh, Even in this day, even some people may say a Roland Martin, and people like him. Here in Dallas, we have a young lady by the name of Molly Belt that owns a newspaper. We have somebody named Cheryl Smith, who is a black female, who also uh, is the editor of about three different, you know, newspapers here. But black journalists who were not in the Dallas Morning News, who were not in the Dallas Times Herald, who were not in the New York Times, who were not published in the Washington Post, have been the gatekeepers of our record. And we don't necessarily have them celebrated outside of the National Association of Black Journalists. Within themselves, they do celebrate and honor each other. But I know that that is definitely an aspect of life that is not really given a lot of a lot of emphasis. So I would like to say the black journalists, they don't get the pay, and they don't get the notoriety that they
Mhm.
should.
Yeah.
And they get canceled if they get out of line in a major airspace. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that we need to look at. And
The cancel culture, is that what you're referencing?
well, you can get canceled for pretty much anything, including the hair you wear. And so, as a black journalist, they've had to try to navigate spaces and then be held back on little mere technicalities. I don't like that your hair is wavy. I'd rather it be more European looking, things like that. So, we just had the Texas Crown Act that was passed here, and
Right.
that also has been a monumental victory because it had come before the legislature before and was turned down at the previous session, and so they brought it back again, and this time it did pass. But
Because the journalist promoted it to Shara Parker, which she got a hold to that. I mean, there
right,
was a lot of people that worked on it, but again, your example of how journalism helped her voice and the way she articulated how that impacts the larger community was very helpful and I think instrumental in getting that legislation passed. So I
right,
give
and
a
she
Mhm.
shout
did.
out to Shara
Shout
Parker.
out to Tashara Parker, WFAA Channel 8, Dallas Fort Worth. But yes, but she definitely has always, since she's hit the Dallas market, she's been very active, very community driven and connected.
So you mentioned something, you kind of barely glided over something that I wanted to ask both of you about. I read a meme on Instagram this week. It happened to be on the Lean In Instagram page, and it said many people refer to it as a black tax. It's a weight that you know that you have to perform better and do everything better than your white colleagues to get the same space. So, talk to me about what that means to you individually. How has that quote unquote black tax been something that you have had to deal with?
Well, I was raised, and I think for generations, our families, and most Black families historically have a couple of different conversations with their kids. One is what to do when you stop by the police so you don't get killed. The other conversation is about how you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, to get a quarter of as much as your counterpart, as your white counterpart, for sure. And so that's something we were ingrained we were it was ingrained in us to know that we didn't have the room to be less than excellent, because our excellence would really not even rise to be, would not be treated as such. We would still be getting half as much and not as far. And also that in the workplace, things our work is scrutinized, our performance is scrutinized differently. um, we're often held to a higher standard. We have the president of Harvard Law who was accused of some type of plagiarism or what. But I'm gonna tell you something. I don't know a lawyer that doesn't plagiarize anything. I don't know one. Matter of fact, I would, if you find me one, find me one. Not find me one. The whole concept of Westlaw and Lexis, yes, you have to give, you have to tell where the contribution came from. But technically, at the end of the day, I mean, what she did, I promise you, if you went through the annals of history, you're going to find some quote or some document or something that some other person wrote that they weren't held to that standard. And so we, African Americans and Black people in this country feel highly scrutinized over the things that they do, that they're treated differently and held to a higher standard than their counterparts. And there are so many studies, where, in education, uh, that where the work of a Black student and a white student in a blind study, they have one for law schools at NYU, exact same paper presented to people blindly, but there were things embedded into that paper that made one person assume that one person was Black and the other person was white.
Mm-hmm.
And the same mistakes were in those papers, but yet the one that they thought was done by a Black person, they graded much lower. Don't know how they got into law school in the first place. And the white student, it was showed a great effort. I mean, those types of things. But also the black tax for me was not what we considered the black tax. That's just Black life. That's just life. But the black tax for me in my community is the tax that we pay by when we achieve and we get to middle and maybe upper middle class or even more. There's a responsibility on us that we have to go back and take care of everybody else in our family, that we have to help the person behind us. We all collectively have to help the person who hasn't achieved as much. My parents would have been expected to have to pay and contribute to their younger siblings when they, if they went to college, or the grandkids, or a cousin, or somebody down the street, or somebody at their church, that the person who achieved more than their income. I may have done a great job in 1975, and I'm making $40,000 a year. That's $1 million in today's standards for these families. But that $40,000, now I have to help the person who's making, $800 a year. That's the expectation, that we can't take and reinvest our money. We can't create generational wealth, because the money that we make over and above what somebody else will make, we have to use to go and buy, we have to go and help buy food and diapers for relatives. We can't go and buy land and property.
And friends.
Yeah, we have to help our friends.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So do you think that this lean in post that I read, it said that approximately 1/3 of Black women have had that experience. To me, that seemed incredibly low. Like,
It is.
I mean, Audrey, you and I have talked about this topic before. Um, I, I, I mean, it seems to me that is all, and I think you said it. That's just life. I mean, it seems to me saying 1/3 have experienced it. That's the 1/3 that admitted it to the probably white person that conducted the poll.
Right. I think
mean,
there's more of people polled. Maybe that was how they responded to. I know that voice. Hey, I know that voice. Those are my babies over there.
It wouldn't be alive if my dogs didn't bark.
They hear me. I'm sure they hear my voice. I'm sure it's me.
I don't.
Yeah.
I do believe, though, you're right. That is the
Hey,
experience I think that we all have felt, and we live with the weight of. You
Hmm.
live with the weight of knowing that you have to do more.
right. This is Benny. This is the one
Yes.
that's on
Hey,
puppy
Benny.
puppy therapy.
Hey, hey, I got a THC chew for you.
Will it help him not mark? That's the problem.
Well, I don't know. He'll probably sleep through it.
The problem is where we're going potty. So to me, everything in my house, if you know who my husband is, he's dude of Dude Food Fire. Everything always comes back to food in my house, and so I find that to me one of the greatest things that brings people together is food. Uh, and I think it would surprise many people out there to know the contribution that Black Americans, especially Black Southern Americans, have had to kind of what we consider Southern food, or in Texas in the South, just food, comfort food. But I read a book by Jessica Harris called High on the Hog. It's also a documentary now,
Mhm.
and then there's another chef named Michael Twitty that I've followed through my husband for quite a while, and he has a book called The Cooking Gene, Gene, not Jean. Um, and I've read both of those books, and I was really stricken by the contribution of the slaves way back then to to food and cooking and some of the things that we regularly think of as Southern food. But I don't, if anybody out there hasn't read those two books, if you're at all interested in food and the, I guess, anthropology or
Mhm.
study of society and food, those both of those books are incredibly interesting about the contribution of Black Americans to just food culture.
And that's a good topic too. And I do want to read that book, High on the Hog. But there's also a documentary they did on HBO several years ago called The Legacy of Cotton. And in it, it talked about how we've evolved, in a lot of ways. But even medically, when the slave and and after that in Jim Crow, people who had not didn't have the resources, we didn't get the best. We didn't live high on the hog.
No,
Living
we
high on
didn't.
the hog is a term that describes that you get the best of the meat on the hog. The
Mhm.
higher you up on the hog,
Right.
the better the meat is. And so the master, the slave owner, the people who had the money in the community, they got the pork chops,
Mhm.
they got the steak, they got the pork shoulder, but the slave got the pig's feet,
Yep.
the pig tails, the hog maws, those types of food, and those types
Right.
of food became the food that was all we were
Mhm.
allowed.
Right.
Thus, over years, and just like anything, you have a taste for something. If you ever wonder why you taste something for the first time and it feels so good to you and it tastes so good, and you wonder, how do I love this? That
Mhm.
happened to me with rutabagas. I don't know, something about rutabagas. My mom said, how you like rutabagas? I don't know why I like rutabagas. She didn't cook rutabagas, but that's because she ate rutabagas the whole time she was pregnant with me. And so after she had me, she didn't ever want another rutabaga. But 20 years later, I had a rutabaga, and it was like the symphony was playing in my head. Well, the same thing is happening with food.
Mhm.
We eat the food that we're used to, and
Right.
the food that's comfortable for us and makes us happy and makes us feel good. But that same food gives us high blood pressure. That same food gives us, that creates health problems and disparities in our community, diabetes more in our community, but it's evolved that way. We're predisposed at this point. We're
Mhm.
predisposed to high blood pressure
Right.
because of generations of consuming that food. Because my great 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 grandmother ate that, I'm predisposed now. It doesn't mean that I love hog maws. I do not. But but
Oh,
I'm predisposed to diabetes and high blood pressure because she ate it generations ago. And
mhm.
that same generational curse that occurs with food occurs, there's a financial generational curse, there's an educational generational curse. All of those things are combined to bring us to this point where we get to have a conversation about our history. But I love,
Right.
I'm a foodie. I love.
I
And
think about
Remembering Black Dallas also has cookbooks. So if you're looking for some
okay.
good, um, I make some mean greens, don't I,
Ooh,
Audrey? But anyway, I can eat greens every day.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't have to have anything else with them. I just
Cornbread. I require cornbread. I really do. But
okay.
that's
I
just
see.
me.
I just like greens. I don't have to have cornbread,
I do.
but um, there are a lot of good soul food cookbooks out there. And of course, we span the globe, we span the different continents. So, you can get some good Caribbean food, you can get some
mhm.
good Latino culture tied in there too, as well as just some good old homegrown Southern cooking.
I love the Southern cooking. I mean, I've eaten all over the world. One of the places I think that in my travels that has been the most um, impactful, not inspirational, obviously, but impactful was whenever I went to Zanzibar. And the tour in Zanzibar, on the one hand, was of the spice farms and the food, how they combine the spices into basically Swahili food and kind of come up with their own type of food in Zanzibar. But in the tour that I went on, it also toured the place that is now a church where they held the slave auctions. Those weren't the slave auctions for the American slaves; those were more of the European slaves there.
Mhm.
That was, I think, to me, one of the most impactful places that I've ever visited because the emotion that you felt going underneath the church into the bowels of the church into these tiny little squares with underground where they held the slaves, and them telling you basically, I don't remember the number now, but however many people that they would put in a room holding them before they would go upstairs to be auctioned at what is now the church, uh, the front of the church. It was so emotional, um, that to go to that place and to experience that in a way that I'll never forget. But on the good side of it, I remember the food too, and my mother's cooking even, you know, as influenced as it was from the different parts of my heritage, my Irish heritage, my Indian
Mhm.
indigenous heritage. She was influenced also by the Black culture, and I don't think she even knew it. I mean, she wasn't educated; she didn't know, those things, but most of the things that she made, I think, were influenced by Black culture.
Well, Black culture has touched any and all. um, Black culture, especially in the music you're hearing now. The
Yep.
young people love. They're not so tied up necessarily with, oh, that's rock, oh, that's
Right.
country, or oh, that's soul versus bluegrass, or gospel versus, as they like to say, white Christian evangelical music. If you continue to listen, you're going to find some people, as they say, that have crossed over,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
they are, I'm going to say, infiltrating the walls of all of those different isms.
But isn't that the thing, food and music seem to be the things in our culture, at least in America, that seem to help us cross those boundaries. I mean, Elvis, bringing what basically was Black gospel music to the forefront. And nowadays you've got Kane Brown in the country music industry. You've got Warren Treaty. Oh my gosh, I love me some Warren Treaty. Crossing over into country in a place that I don't know. I mean, you can't really say Charlie Pride was the epitome of representation in the country music industry, but it really seems like that country music, being the last to come along, has kind of made an appearance with some of the diversity, both racial diversity and sexual orientation diversity as well. Um,
Absolutely.
So, so maybe music is the thing that will bring us together, music and food.
And I would encourage people to go and try the different types of food. You will be very surprised.
100%.
Some of the best places to go. When you go to a different city, you should always try to find a staple in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, as we would
Yep.
like to say. I know when Audrey and I go to uh, Houston, Texas, we always eat the all these shameless plugs for these various restaurants. We always eat Frenchies. We have to have
Well,
we have to have Frenchies fried chicken.
shout out to Judge John Crusoe. That's his
Isn't
family's
that the truth?
restaurant. Judge Crusoe, I just gotta say,
Yes,
y'all
yes,
chicken
that's
is
his
so good.
family's. That's there, and when we're here, we eat Rudy's and Halls and Henderson's here in Dallas. So
Hmm.
we have certain places. If you go to Baton Rouge, you got to go by Tony's and go get a bag of boudin balls and go get some fresh catfish. I'm talking about, you have to watch the little catfish squirm across the little line, and he meets the butcher and he gets dropped in the grease. I mean, so we
Oh, our vegans are out there
experienced
going.
some
They're
good,
cringing. Our vegans are
Cajun
cringing.
cooking in Baton
Yeah.
Rouge, right there at Tony's. I mean, so there are different places, all over the United States that can really, as they say, put it down in the kitchen.
Elevate your palate. That's what I say. Let's elevate our
Absolutely.
palate. You know,
Absolutely.
just try it. You don't like it, that's fine, but just try it and see.
Hey,
Just try it.
that's the rule in my house. I mean, we travel and we have a rule that when we travel, you cannot go to a restaurant that you could go to at home. And
Right.
so if you're in Dallas, I mean, we got every chain known to man in Dallas, and so that limits in some places the restaurants. But the point of that is that we do like to go to local restaurants, not the ones that are necessarily getting all the recognition from this award or that award, but we like to go to those too. But we like to go to the ones that are off the beaten path, that are the places the locals go to. My dad always had a rule that if you go somewhere that somewhere you're not familiar with, you look around at the restaurant that has the most cars at it, and that's probably the place you want to go,
Mhm.
where the locals are all at. Well, we've been doing this an hour. I promised that we would end by 3 o'clock, so it's a little bit after three. I appreciate you, Audrey and Candace, for joining me today, for having a conversation, because I think, whether we talk about food or we talk about music, ultimately it's the conversations that can bring us together and stop the divisiveness that we're feeling as people, as cultures, as communities, and as our country. So I appreciate having the conversation. I appreciate y'all trusting me to have the conversation with, and I hope that all of the viewers out there have maybe learned something or gained a perspective that you didn't have before today. So, thank you for joining me for the Michelle O'Neill Show. Join us on Tuesday for Rita Oliver when we hear her story as a financial advisor. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.